Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. You've been watching the news the last couple of days down in Georgia. Yeah, Antifa, they're back at it again. They are burning parts of downtown, cars, buildings, busting out glass, throwing rocks, attacking law enforcement, doing all kinds of things down in the downtown Atlanta area. And it should just be a reminder that Antifa, the threat of Antifa, is still there. Okay, just because we haven't heard a lot from Antifa in the last couple of years since the Summer of Love doesn't mean that that threat is over, that they've gone away. In fact, there's a lot of evidence showing that the threat is even greater because since the Summer of Love, they seem to have coordinated their efforts a lot more, and they've actually gone out and got some professional training. There's video of them doing that. There's a lot of evidence indicating that they have been hiring professionals to come out and train them, people that have military experience, to train them on how to do the things that they do, but in a more professional way. So in a sense, the threat is actually greater now, I believe, than it has been in the past. Also, to something that we have to factor in is the fact that we have this really bad illegal immigration problem, where there are millions and millions a year coming across our border. I think I just saw a couple of days ago that they're saying that they've caught something like 4.5 million, 4.3 million coming across the border this last year. And of course, when you hear they catch them coming across the border, that doesn't mean that they're kicking them back. There's most of them are still coming in. Those are just the ones that they caught. But there's still others that they haven't caught. So I think it would be very easy to say that at least about 5 million people came across the border. And there's no way to know who all those are. I mean, it's just seems to be logical to assume that a certain percentage of them are coming here for nefarious reasons. And so when you factor that in to the Antifa violence, or that type of violence, and just the fact that our society is starting to crumble, and there's just more violence in general. These big cities, medium-sized cities, suburban areas, everywhere, we're seeing increase in violence, increase in group violence, where they're attacking people for their things, their goods, or they're just doing it because they're just mean. They're just, they have no value of life anymore, and they're just, set out to attack people because they don't like them because of their skin color or their age or whatever it is. This is a very real threat that we should be thinking about on a very regular basis and planning and training. A couple of weeks ago, I had a dream, and I'm not making any accusation or any statement that this dream was any kind of prophetic dream. I don't believe it was. I think it was just, how our minds work, and we play things out in our dreams. But it has got me thinking more about it. And in the dream, here at our homestead, in our local community, we started having problems with Antifa. They came out here and they started attacking and going farm to farm and doing the things that they do. And in my dream, myself and the other people in our community was trying to, figure out a defense plans and stuff and how to do it. And so it's got me thinking more about that. And that even though we live out in the country, and many of you do also, which you should, it's still way safer than anything in the city. I mean, it's going to become absolutely, completely unsafe. They are already. I was looking at places like St. Louis. I think their crime rate has gone up about 300% in the last year or two. This is happening in a pretty wide pattern all over the country. But still, being out here in the country does not assure you that you will never see that kind of violence. It's very likely that some of you will, and you still have to prepare for that. You still have to be on guard for that. And while life may be pretty peaceful right now, as we watch society kind of pull apart and crumble, the amount of violence that we'll see will most likely increase. That's just part of a pattern that you see throughout history as societies come apart and crumble. The bad guys, the ones that are already the bad actors, they take it as an opportunity for them to do their bad things against people, and there's probably less organized response against them because things are falling apart. And then there's also the people that normally wouldn't do bad things. They're not necessarily that type, but they're in an extreme circumstance. They're hungry, they're ill, they're cold, whatever it is. And so they feel they have no other choice but to do these acts of violence. Again, this is actually pretty common if you look throughout history of societies that start to kind of unravel and come apart, to see drastic increases in violence. And so that is a major thing that we have to deal with. Myself and many others on YouTube say often that one of the greatest threats that you're going to face is, other people. And so this is the other people that, one of the things that we're talking about. You should be very prepared, at least as much as you possibly can, and have a plan on how to react when this kind of stuff happens. Hopefully, you'll be able to know about it before it gets to your doorstep. And so that is part of setting up a communications with people in your group, in your community, and then knowing where some good sources, whether they're online, local message groups, or just local news, to know when this kind of stuff starts happening. Maybe having a police scanner in your home that's properly programmed so that you can keep up on that. And when you hear maybe, the next town over or within your county that there's a increase in this type of violent activity, it can kind of tip you off and let you know that, okay, it's starting to get close to home. Now I need to start putting my plan into action. We, especially for those of us that live out like we do, we fall into this false sense of security a lot of times, that because we live out like this, we don't have to deal with that kind of violence. And that's actually true for the most part. We don't see or experience the type of violent threats that many people would if they live in the city. But we can't allow that false sense of security to kind of dictate how we react and how we, do our normal daily life, because there is always a chance it could happen. And in fact, a lot of people might argue that people out in the country are even a bigger threat because, emergency response is slow. Out here, a group of people could come to our home and do lots of horrible things and be gone before the police even get here. And so we need to have a pretty solid plan and the tools that it's needed to protect and defend yourself. You should be kind of examining your property, how it's set up. Is it the best setup for defending your property? What would you do if bad people came on? What would you do in the middle of the night? You and your family are in your home sleeping, and someone comes on your property, or a group of people come on your property to do harm. What is your plan? What's your response? Do you have ways to alert your family, to alert you, whether it's dogs or, our alarms, motion sensor alarms, or other things like that, to alert you to people coming onto the property? Do you have certain things in place that could restrict them or at least funnel them into one area, meaning that if your property is very open and they can just come in from any direction they want, or do you have it a little bit more closed off, whether it be fencing or tree lines or bush shrubs, or even just, allowing nature to kind of grow up around the perimeter of your property and making it difficult for people to actually pass through it. That's one of the ways that we do around here. And so what it does is it funnels people into just a couple of areas. So the likelihood of people trying to walk through, 8-9 foot tall blackberry vines and things like that are very unlikely. They're going to take the path of least resistance. And so it's done on a purpose. Do you have things in your property that can be used as cover and concealment for you that you can get behind? And have you trained and practiced in that way? Maybe it's large decorative rocks that, you see all the time in yards and along driveways to make them look pretty, but they also have a dual purpose. They can be used to get behind as a shooting position, a defensive position. Are you familiar with your yard? I advocate all the time. I do it within our local group. I tell our people, you need to get out at night without a flashlight, and you need to walk around in your property. You need to walk around your yard. Do it when there's a full moon and you can see really well, and do it when there's no moon and it's really dark. How well do you know your property, of where there's little holes in the yard, or an area where the kids always leave their bikes laying out, so that you know the areas that you can move very freely without potentially harming yourself from, tripping over something. Do you also get out at night and listen and see how well you can see into areas that could be threats? Get familiar with your property. It's your home. It's your ground, and so that is the home advantage, and you need to take advantage of it being a home advantage and get to know your property really well, and the places that could be a threat. Another thing to consider is, if danger comes to your home, you want to, and I'm speaking to those of you that would be the ones that would to defend the home. You're the one that's going to go out and face the danger and defend the home. You want to keep that firefight away from the direction of your home. If you have a wife, children, or whatever inside that home, you don't want to be standing out on the front porch firing down range at them and them firing back at you, and those rounds potentially entering your home and injuring your family or killing them. You want to have a plan to try to direct that firefight away from your home. So if something happens, you want to have a plan to be able to move to a different position that could potentially change the angle of fire, so that your home and your family inside the home is not at an immediate threat. So this is something to plan out. Also, and this is critical, your family, especially if you have children, they need to be training on this too. They need to know that when things get bad, that there's a certain place in the home that they go to. Our children know that. There's a certain place in our home, and the oldest takes them there. And that way, I know where they're at in the home, so that if there's a firefight, I know the spot that they're at, and how I need to direct that fire away from the home so as to not injure or kill them. If the plan is to evacuate, they need to know how to do that and where to go. If there's a meeting rendezvous point on the property, this is the kind of stuff that we should be thinking about. Do you have potentially caches of ammunition on the property? Certain places on your property around your home that you can stash extra magazines in case something happens, or even a firearm. Do you have a way to communicate with the people around you, maybe your neighbors or people within your your close-knit community? Do you have a way to communicate and let them know that something's happening? And do you train with them? Do you train where they call you up and say, hey, it's on, get over here? How fast can you respond? Where are you supposed to get to? You don't want to pull up in the middle of a firefight. So have a plan of certain places, whether it's your property or your neighbor's property or your buddy's property. Where do you meet? Where do you come in? That way he knows that where you're coming in at, so that you're not susceptible to friendly fire from your buddy. These are the kind of things that a lot of you should be thinking of. Some of you do really well on this. You have maybe military combat experience or law enforcement experience, that you have dealt with this kind of situation. You've been in a firefight. You know what to expect. And so this comes fairly easy for you to think about. But others, you don't. And it doesn't mean that you're not capable of it. It just puts you at a slight disadvantage. So you need to think about these things and kind of think outside of your comfort zone and box, so that you can figure out a plan for active shooters on your property that may be trying to come in and do harm. Again, it's not something that any of us want to think about. We would hope and pray that it would never happen. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen. And we should be always prepared for that. And as the country and as our society starts to kind of fall apart more and more, we should certainly do everything we can to prepare for that, because the likelihood of this level of violence finding us, even out here in the country in remote areas, is ever increasing, simply because of a collapsing society. Folks, it's time to get your houses in order. It's time to prepare mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.